Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Crowds have gathered in Myanmar for the funeral of a 19-year-old woman who was shot dead during anti-coup protests on Wednesday. Tributes have flooded into social media for Kayal Sin, known as Angel, with many calling her a hero. Since the 1st of February military coup, Myanmar has been gripped by protests demanding the release of detained elected leaders. More than 54 people have died since the protests began, according to the UN Human Rights Office, although other reports put the figure much higher.
We're also appalled at the documented attacks against emergency medical staff and ambulances.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has called on security forces to halt their vicious crackdown on peaceful protesters. The House of Representatives has cancelled Thursday's session at the US Capitol in Washington in response to a possible plot to breach the building. The move was prompted by intelligence that a militia group planned an attack for March the 4th. The day conspiracy theorist group QAnon believes Donald Trump will return for a second term. The Senate will continue with its agenda and security has been ramped up. A mob loyal to Mr. Trump stormed the Congress building in January. That attack came as lawmakers were inside moving to certify Democrat Joe Biden's election victory. The riots saw 5 people lose their lives. Northern Irish loyalist paramilitary groups have told British Prime Minister Boris Johnson they are temporarily withdrawing support for the 1998 peace agreement due to concerns over the Brexit deal. While the groups pledged peaceful and democratic opposition to the deal, such a stark warning increases the pressure on Boris Johnson, his Irish counterpart Michael Martin and the European Union over Brexit. Northern Ireland's 1998 peace deal, known as the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement, ended 3 decades of violence between mostly Catholic nationalists fighting for a united Ireland and Unionists who want Northern Ireland to stay part of the United Kingdom. The UN's Human Rights Commissioner has called on Ethiopia to allow independent experts into the country to investigate continuing violations that may amount to war crimes in the Tigray region.
60 million people.
Michelle Bachelet said she had received distressing reports of killings, rape, destruction and looting. The UN says the Ethiopian and Eritrean armed forces, the Tigray's People's Liberation Front and Amhara regional forces are all implicated. A statement said her office had corroborated information about indiscriminate shelling in 3 towns and reports of grave human rights violations and abuses, including mass killings in Axum by Eritrean armed forces. Pope Francis has given a message of hope to his brothers and sisters in Iraq ahead of his historic but also risky trip to the country. Francis, who is due to start the 4-day whirlwind trip in Baghdad on Friday, said he was coming as a pilgrim to implore forgiveness and reconciliation from the Lord after years of war and terrorism. Iraq's minority Christian community has been devastated by wars and repression by Islamic State insurgents. During the trip, Francis will visit the former Islamic State stronghold of Mosul. 10 former members of the Colombian guerrilla group FARC have been killed and 3 have been captured during a bombing in the southeastern Guaviare province. In a joint operation of military and police forces, 13 members of FARC dissidents were neutralised, 10 of them killed and 3 captured, that's according to the Ministry of Defence. Former FARC guerrillas who reject the 2016 deal with the state have become a security threat in Colombia, accused of murdering human rights activists, producing cocaine and taking part in illegal mining. Dramatic footage now of one of SpaceX's prototype rockets landing before exploding in what was thought to be connected to a methane leak. The rocket managed to touch down in contrast to its predecessors, which all crashed into the ground. But when the next generation space vehicle touched down on its legs, a fire developed around its base, and 8 minutes later the rocket blew itself apart on the landing pad. Despite this, SpaceX will be hugely encouraged by the test. The prototype successfully executed its in-flight maneuvers and for the first time made a reasonably soft landing. And finally, a Dutch inventor is testing a possible new way to screen for coronavirus infections that involves having a person walk into an airlocked cabin and screaming. A person steps into the booth and then begins to scream or yell or sing. According to the inventor, yelling and screaming allows the spread of tens of thousands of particles containing coronavirus if a person is infected. These particles are then collected, dried and measured by the machine. According to the inventor, the device could be used as a useful screening tool outside concerts, airports, schools or offices. And that's your international news around the world in 5, and now back to the channel studios in Lagos.